Assalamu alaikum and welcome to this our final edition of Book Bytes, the Ramadan show. And what a way to end this beautifully reflective month with an incredibly important publication, a publication that I want every young and old member of your family to be reading. Because there's a significant contribution being made here to documenting the social history of Muslims in South Africa, but especially reaching back to see how the kind of challenges that were dealt with in establishing Islam on our continent, in our country, in the Western Cape in particular, in this instant. And this particular publication is called The Crescent at the Cape, the true story of Shaykh Abu Bakr Effendi, 1814 to 1880, earmarking his physical life, written by none other than a very well-known journalist and author, Mr. Shafiq Morton, who we've had the pleasure of speaking to a couple of months ago on his book on Tuan Guru, from the Cape, from the Spice Islands to the Cape. So by 1962, Tuan Guru, founder of South Africa's first mosque and madrasa, had been in his grave for half a century. The Cape Muslim population had exploded in size, but was sliding into decline. Many of the imams, lacking education and had just taken on a kind of lineage, had become ignorant and entitled. So there was a problem in the succession that was identified later on. And there was unending conflict in the community, which was fought out in the Cape High Court. And Mr. Morton goes into detail in this publication about these sort of conflicts and how these were, brought back to unification. In the same year, a group of concerned community elders made a call for a teacher to be sent to the Cape from Istanbul. No one knows who these people were, but it was their intervention that saw the arrival of Sheikh Abu Bakr Effendi, an Ottoman scholar who came across as an official ambassador, an Osmanli ambassador in early 1863. Welcomed by those keen to learn, he faced abuse from a coterie of imams who felt threatened by them. Pretty much this sort of undemocratic lineage felt threatened, and perhaps livelihoods felt threatened. Sadly, it is their malcontent that has so jaundiced the story for over 140 years. And in this certainly well-received, well-researched biography, Mr. Shafiq Morton reveals for the first time this true story of Sheikh Abu Bakr Effendi, one of the standout historical figures in the growth of Islam at the foot of Africa. Mr. Morton doesn't need extensive introduction in our media spaces and in our community. He's a Cape Town-based journalist, editor, surfer, he says, and radio presenter, but an long award-winning, decades-long, career spanning decades-long. He has covered South African stories such as the anti-apartheid campaign, the TRC, and has had assignment in various countries around the world, has won the National Vodacom Award, the MTN Awards, the Liberty Life Awards, and numerous awards, including being recommended as one of the 500 most influential Muslims in the world by the Royal Islamic Institute in Jordan, and receiving the Akaf Award for his contribution to community media. I don't want to waste too much time in bringing him back online. Welcome to the show, Mr. Morton. It's an absolute pleasure to have you back online with such an incredibly beautiful contribution as your current publication is. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, Shafinaaz, and the pleasure is equal for me to chat to you about the book.
Absolutely. I read your book on Tuan Guru, used to remain with me. So to read it in tandem is actually significant and beautiful. And I commend you, for finally bringing, I know you've been spending years on this publication, on the research for it. So to get right in, tell us about, putting together the research on the life of Sheikh Abu Bakr Effendi and what it meant as part of your body of work that's out there.
It was a very, very long journey, and the journey was initiated by OCAF South Africa, because this book is part of a series called Leaders and Legacies of South Africa. And the book, I started it during COVID. And of course, the minute I started on the book, the libraries closed down, the archives closed down. So it became quite a challenging project. And it took a bit longer than what we expected, but alhamdulillah, very happy that we were able to conclude it and to go on this journey of discovery and in finding out who exactly Shaykh Bakr Effendi was, and the tragedy of the fact that he has been historically misrepresented.
I think, and that's especially the importance of your work, is to be able to retell the story, but to also fix that legacy, to clean that legacy.
No, absolutely. And I mean, when I started the project, I honestly did not know where it was going to take me. I'd heard a lot of things about Abu Bakr, reading people like the late Dr. Ahmad Davids and what available literature there was. But
Right.
I think what opened the doors was the research of Dr. Halim Cenkuglu, who is a Turkish scholar who had access to the archives in Istanbul. And there he discovered a lot of letters that Shaykh Abu Bakr had sent home for publication in Turkey at that particular time. And those letters became a valuable resource in actually understanding what was going on inside Shaykh Abu Bakr's head, and also something of the challenges that he had to face when he came to the Cape.
And those challenges seem to have created a bit of a legacy of these divisions, and you so succinctly open it up in the course of the book. But let's go back a little to the history. I mean, we speak about the arrival and the legacy of Tuan Guru, and the kind of coming from Batavian nobility and his expertise and experience, and then moving across, and how that is taken as legacy, and then you bring in Sheikh Abu Bakr Effendi. Talk to us about this sort of bridging this gap, if I can call it that, right in the historical detail of these two very different but very equally well-intended scholars.
Shafinaaz, I'm glad you pointed this out, because basically in the Western Cape there are three main figureheads. You've got Sheikh Yusuf of Makassar, who passed on in 1699. You've got Tuan Guru, who passed on in 1807. And then you've got Shaykh Abu Bakr, who passed on in 1888. So you've got this continuum, but in between, obviously, lots of challenges. And the biggest problem that I picked up was that Tuan Guru, before he passed away in 1807, he actually managed to smuggle a letter home back to Dori in the Spice Islands, asking for two of his sons to come to the Cape to help him with his mission, because Tuan Guru had already sensed that after his passing, there would be problems at the Cape. He'd done his best to educate the imams and the people around him, but he hadn't had enough time to really establish the sort of academic approach to Islam, fiqh, understanding how to do things. He was not very confident about that. Unfortunately, the letter seems to have disappeared. It was discovered, but his sons never came to the Cape. So after Tuan Guru passed on, there were no new scholars, no new input of anything to do with Islam from 1807 till about 1850, when the Cape Muslims started to perform the Hajj. So there was this huge gap in which Islamic knowledge in the Cape started to deteriorate, and the imams started to become very, very corrupt, and the position of imam became hereditary as opposed to a person's abilities and talents. So things are pretty much in a downward spiral by the time the 1860s came around. And I like to regard Sheikh Yusuf, he kind of was the spark for Islam in the Cape. Tuan Guru, who renewed it, and then Shaykh Abu Bakr, who renewed it again. And I believe if it hadn't been for Shaykh Abu Bakr's contribution, I doubt whether we would probably even be having this conversation today.
Right. And that continuum definitely has gravitas, because when you see that Islam is established in so many ways and across the different lineages that come across over the centuries. But now when we talk about also this question of succession of imams in the Cape, and the 19th century being so volatile in terms of gaining a foothold properly, but at the same time being mismanaged. It's really the lineage being mismanaged for personal gain or for financial or family gain or whatever. How, at what point are they able to take back the reins in terms of finding unity, finding some kind of resolution?
Well, in fact, about 10 to 15 years after Shaykh Bakr had come to the Cape, he actually notes in his diaries that things had calmed down considerably. But we have to give some kind of background as to why the whole Imam question became so big at the Cape. In
Sure.
1834, slavery was abolished. And by 1838, the slaves were basically free after they served their apprenticeships after the abolishment of slavery. But here was a problem. The Muslim community, the ex-slave community, had no political representation. They had no political status. They had no economic status. They were very, very poor. So the only leadership position in the community, the only position in the community that offered any status was that of an imam. So an imam meant everything. If you were an imam, you were the top dog. You could live a comfortable life. You could order people around, and you were basically the link between the colonialists and the community as well. So imam in those days, it was more than being an imam. It was actually a political position because that was the only position of leadership in the community at that particular time.
Okay, so let's take a quick ad break, and then we're going to come back and get into the challenges and the contributions of Sheikh Abu Bakr Effendi, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042 203 1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
The month of mercy and endless blessings. The month of sharing the love, care, and spreading hope. This Ramadan, you can make it count by supporting one of the many projects by Penny Appeal South Africa. Donate your zakah, lila, fidya, kafara, and fitra safely and securely, knowing that your support goes to those most in need. Give hope. Make every minute count. May all your efforts and intentions be accepted. Penny Appeal, serving humanity, transforming lives.
This Ramadan, spread the love with Sunshine D margarine, the perfect addition to your seri table for spreading, baking, and cooking. Sunshine D is rich in essential vitamin A, E, and D, and is the tastiest way to get their day or night started. Sunshine D tastes nice, no lies.
This Ramadan, spread the winds of generosity across the world with the Al Imdad Foundation. Sponsor a food hamper for just 800 Rand and help us deliver essential food aid supplies to struggling families across 40 countries globally. Let's feed the fasting this Ramadan. Donate online at alimdad.com or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
In the aftermath of the tragic earthquakes in Syria and Turkey, thousands of survivors are struggling and in need of food, shelter, and life-saving aid. This Ramadan, take a closer look at the countless lives that have been turned upside down. You have the power to help. Your donation is the lifeline, a beacon of hope in an otherwise hopeless situation. Please donate today. Visit donate.unhcr.org/RamadanZA.
Salam Media, your spiritual companion this Ramadan.
We're back with our discussion on the book, The Crescent at the Cape, The True Story of Shaykh Abu Bakr Effendi, with Mr. Shafiq Morton. And we're discussing the advent and arrival of Shaykh Abu Bakr Effendi and the reasoning around that. Mr. Morton, welcome back online. So let's get into the motivation and how Shaykh Abu Bakr Effendi came to arrive on our shores.
Yeah, Shafinaaz, that's a very interesting story, because what happened was a group of elders in our community, and we really have to salute them for their courage in admitting that the community needed help. And they initially had made a request for books to be sent to the Cape, and that transpired into them approaching the Sultan in Istanbul and saying, we need somebody to come to the Cape to teach us about our Islam, because we are scared we're going to lose our Iman, we're going to lose our faith. So it was quite a lengthy diplomatic process, because it had to go through Queen Victoria, and the Ottoman government had a deal with the British government that would actually allow people such as Shaykh Abu Bakr Effendi to be sent to Cape Town. Shaykh Abu Bakr Effendi at that time was working in the Ottoman court. He was working in the Department of Foreign Affairs as a minor diplomat. Just to quickly add that Shaykh Abu Bakr Effendi himself had been studying for more than 20 years. He studied in Makkah, in Medina, he studied in Baghdad, he studied in Anatolia, he studied at the feet of his father in Kurdistan. So he was a very, very polished alim, and also a diplomat. And he was spotted by one of the Sultan's courtiers, who actually was a friend of Shaykh Abu Bakr Effendi, and he recommended him to the Sultan. Shaykh Abu Bakr Effendi was asked to write a test, which he passed with flying colors, and he was nominated to go to the Cape. At this stage, I think it's important to note that Shaykh Abu Bakr Effendi could have turned this down, because he was heading for a very nice career as a diplomat, as an alim in Istanbul. He would have been very comfortable and well looked after. But instead, he chose, in the spirit of his forefathers, who were great educators, to take a huge leap of faith and allow the Sultan to send him to the Cape to educate a community whose language he couldn't speak and about whom he knew very, very little. And he stepped on board a ship, and after a long journey via England to meet the Turkish or the Ottoman ambassador there, he lands in Cape Town in 1862, January of 1862.
So he himself comes as a religious Ottoman ambassador. What were the major challenges that he faced on his arrival and in his early time?
When he came to the Cape, the first thing we noted was the chaos and the ignorance. I mean, he talks about the ignorance of the people and of the imams. But let me hasten to add that he was not arrogant about it. Time and time again, he says in his letters, he describes the people of the Cape as beautiful people, as innocent people, people being exploited by the imams, etc., etc. But when he arrived at the Cape, he was welcomed with a huge fanfare. A whole group of imams met him on the quayside. He was taken to where he had to stay. But when he opened his school, and when some of the established imams saw what he was teaching, then he became a threat. And it got so bad that the imams in the Burqa, for example, whose followers or murids were attending Shaykh Abu Bakr's school, that the imam set up the other followers or part of members of the Jamaat to go and harass and assault Shaykh Abu Bakr's students. So it was that bad. And there was an Imam Abdul Wahab of the lower Kiapini Street Mosque who really became a fly in the ointment as far as Shaykh Abu Bakr was concerned, so much so that he actually made a complaint to the governor of the Cape, Mr. P.G. Wodehouse, or to saying, my pupils, my learners, my students are being insulted and assaulted in the streets. And Shaykh Abu Bakr goes on to say, that I haven't forced anybody to attend the school. There's no coercion. People come here because they want to come and learn. Unfortunately, the governor of the Cape didn't do very much about it, but that's just one of the challenges. I'll give you an example of the kind of ignorance. For example, there was a belief at the Cape at the time that if you shaved your beard, you became a kafir. Astaghfirullah. The Shafi ruling on that is it's makruh. Okay.
Okay.
Then there was the whole idea that if you swallowed your saliva during Ramadan, you broke your fast. The whole call of the Shafi madhab is if you do deliberately, you break your fast. And there were special spittoons that people used to have. Then the imams used to tell their followers that their qurban, for example, was not valid, was batil, if they didn't give them meat to the imams. Then the imams would tell them, your fitra money, if they didn't give the fitra money to the imams, their fast wouldn't be accepted. So these are just some of the examples of the kind of ignorance that Shaykh Bakr Effendi had to deal with.
So it's obvious there was a very deliberate attempt to protect territory, and obviously people were exploited for this. So he would have noticed all of these exploitations and these divisive kind of details that came through. And the pettiness, I mean, it just sounds like very petty behavior to hold on to territory, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're spot on. In fact, Shaykh Bakr Effendi's nephew, Umar Lutfi, came to the Cape with Shaykh Bakr, and he helped him in the opening years of the school, writes a diary and makes exactly the same observations. And he says, these poor people being exploited by these imams. Though the interesting thing is that as time progressed, most of these imams fell by the wayside. And Shaykh Bakr notes in his diaries that people did come to their senses. And of course, the other thing, as the Cape Muslims performed the Hajj, they would come back with information that was contrary to what they were being taught by the imams, and they would question the imams on this. So it's very interesting when you look at all of this. There was another question, and this is the Shafi Hanafi scenario. Now, it was a failure on the part of the Ottoman Consul General, Theodore Robey in Cape Town, not to tell Istanbul that the people at the Cape were Shafi. Although when Shaykh Bakr came to the Cape, obviously you could see that the people didn't even know much about the Shafi madhab. But because he was under the control of the Ottoman educational system, he had to teach according to the Hanafi madhab. And this was weaponized against him, And the imams would say that if you stand in front of a Hanafi imam, your salah is not accepted. That we don't accept the Hanafi madhab. And they declared the Hanafi madhab as haram, actually, which is quite bizarre. And what is interesting is that Shaykh Bakr Effendi originally came from Kurdistan, although he is by blood an Arab, he's a Sayyid through Zayd bin Ali radiallahu anh. So he has a very noble lineage. But he tells us in a court case and in his diaries that he studied for 13 years under Khalil Effendi, a Shafi imam, in Makkah, when he was studying in Makkah. So he was fully versed with the Shafi madhab and actually says that he was a Shafi. But when we read the documents, we realize because of his responsibility towards the Ottoman government, he had to teach in the Hanafi madhab. And that also became a point of conflict, although we have to say that the people of the Cape really didn't know the difference between Shafi and Hanafi very much.
And I know some of this contentious debate comes up in what you call the Juma dispute, and this concept that, I wonder sometimes while I was reading it, I'm thinking, well, it just really comes back to holding territory and not wanting to give in any sort of locus of power towards this sheikh who the local imams seem to have felt obviously threatened by.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that story is an interesting one because the grandsons of Tuan Guru, Abdul Rakib and Abdul Rauf and Abdullah, became students of Shaykh Bakr Effendi. And their late father, Imam Abdul Rauf, who was the son of Tuan Guru, on his deathbed, was very happy to meet Shaykh Bakr, and Shaykh Bakr Effendi performed his Salatul Janazah for him. And he was very happy that there was a scholar at the Cape that could educate people, particularly his sons. And Imam Abdul Rakib, he was an imam for over 50 years, by the way, was the imam of the Batencraft Street Mosque, the Nur al-Islam Mosque, and he decided to form his Jummah according to the Hanafi madhab, which means you only have to have 3 people. At the Cape, they used to count to see whether there were more than 40 people, because that's the call of the Shafis. And Imam Abdul Rakib reasoned, why not just perform the Hanafi Jummah, then we have no problems. People can get the spiritual benefit of a Jummah, which is very high in comparison to just performing Dhuhr on a Friday. Unfortunately, it did not go down very well at all, and even certain members of his mosque turned against him, and this whole issue went to court. And the people that took Imam Abdul Rakib to court lost their case on the evidence that Shaykh Bakr Effendi gave, and another character called Haji Abdullah, who was also educated. The complainants lost the case completely.
So you do bring up the palm tree mosque dispute in this way as well. But I also want to look at, with the time that we've got, let's look at the legacy, the contribution made by Shaykh Abu Bakr Effendi and the legacy that he's left to date.
Well, I mean, he was really a very intelligent man. You have to remember that when he arrived at the Cape, he was fluent in Turkish, Kurdish, Arabic, Farsi, and I think German, because when he studied in Istanbul, they had to learn a lot of languages. He comes to the Cape and he has to learn English, and then he realizes that the lingua franca of the old slave community, of the Muslim community, is now Afrikaans. So he learns Afrikaans, and he writes a book called the Bayanuddin in Arabic script. And it's a book of instruction, how to salah. It's a very basic book of fiqh. And his book in Arabic script, in Afrikaans, is one of the pioneering works of Afrikaans, although it was written in Arabic. And it's very interesting how he was able to enunciate the oo and the ah and the e of Afrikaans by being very creative with the Arabic lettering. And the Bayanuddin is, in fact, historically one of the most important books in South Africa, because it's one of the first publications in Afrikaans. And it also shows us that Afrikaans was not spoken, first of all, by the Europeans. It was, first of all, spoken by the slave community. Afrikaans came from the Boer Kaap, and Shaykh Abu Bakr Effendi was in the middle of this. He made many other contributions very quickly. He went on Hajj in 1872, and he discovered that the matofs there were corrupt. And through the authority that he had, he managed to get them fired, and he appointed Sayyid Abdullah Al-Alawi. And the Al-Alawi family, who Abu Bakr Effendi appointed as matofs, acted as matofs for Cape Hajjaj well into the 1980s. 3 or 4 generations of this family served the Cape Hajjaj. And that was just another role that Shaykh Abu Bakr Effendi played. He sorted out the Hajj problems. He also was a great da'i. He was involved in establishing Islam in Port Elizabeth and Uitenhage. He traveled to Mozambique several times as well, trying to preserve Islam in Mozambique. And we believe that he might have gone to Mauritius, but we can't prove it. We don't have any documents as far as that is concerned. So his reach, his footprint was far bigger than just the Cape.
It's significant in so many ways to think that he stood his ground despite the challenges that he experienced. And it's unfortunate when I read, the chapters about the court cases, the challenges, and sort of how difficult times had become for him. I mean, even his personal life is used against him. I would like to think that we can celebrate today. I don't know if you would comment on this, that we've managed Islam in the Cape and in South Africa today is emblematic of unity. We have a more unified front, that all those struggles have amounted at least to this. What can you tell me about that? What can you comment on that?
No, absolutely. Look, people are always going on about unity and all of that stuff. But we have to make the point that unity is not conformity. Unity is all about accommodating diversity. And the lessons we learn from Shaykh Bakr Effendi is that he came to the Cape at a time when things were changing. And the Muslim community at the Cape, for example, had a massive injection of African slaves. I mean, the DNA foundation of the Cape Muslim community is 50% African. And very few people realize this. And very few people realize that the South African Muslim community couldn't be more diverse.
Right.
Cape Muslim identity is a very unique identity. Even if you go to KwaZulu-Natal, you've got the Zanzibari communities, you've got various subgroupings from India, Gauteng as well. And when you look at the South African Muslim community, I'm quite satisfied that, yes, we have our differences, but at the end of the day, on the big questions, we always come together.
And I think it needs to be said that, I mean, even in the terms of when we talk about the four madhab, the major madhab of Islam, the different imams, that there's a dignified fluidity and a respect. It's not a either or. It's not a this is better or that. There's a dignified fluidity. That's, how we've been taught. And so this understanding is that there's that movement of respect and understanding between and learning between the different madhab.
Absolutely, that's a very important point you're making there. I mean, Shafis, Hanafis, Malikis, Hanbalis all pray together behind a Hanbali imam in Makkah, for example. There's no problem. There has never been a problem. If I go to KwaZulu-Natal as a Shafi, I will pray behind a Hanafi imam, no problem. We're all the same at the end of the day. Yes, if we belong to a certain madhab, we have certain different calls or different interpretations. But it doesn't make us different from each other. It's just another way of understanding the deen that doesn't contradict Sharia. So it's a no-brainer. We have more that keeps us together and less that divides us.
And we have access to such beautiful scholarship in our country throughout, if we look across our scholarship, and now even more so with online established madrasas and scholars and imams available to us. So, Mr. Morton, once again, it was an amazing opportunity to have this conversation with you fresh after I've read the book. And I really, really believe this is an important contribution. I hope that lots of people will be picking up copies and sending copies around for Eid and to, families all over the world. What do you hope for this contribution?
Well, Shafinaaz, I just hope that I've managed to correct the legacy of Shaykh Bakr Effendi. I think I've opened the door, inshallah, for further research, for more researchers to come after me, to either contradict me or to find more enriching things about the life of Shaykh Bakr Effendi. But it's been a great honor to actually get to know who Shaykh Bakr Effendi was. And I need to emphasize that the great imams that we've had in Cape Town in particular, I mean, Sheikh Yusuf of Makassar is a Sayyid. He's a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Tuan Guru is. And Shaykh Bakr Effendi was the same. So we've had these people of the most noble lineage coming to our shores and teaching us about Islam. We should be honored by the fact that these people came to our shores and in the way that they've actually taught us, because South African Islam is a very unique Islam, and people from around the world are always looking at us and trying to understand how we've managed to negotiate apartheid and the post-apartheid era with our constitutional rights and how we deal with things.
I certainly hope that, that there'll be a lot of traction for the historical detail that's written, especially with our younger generation. I know that curiosity will be piqued. And I don't think there's a coincidence when material of this nature makes it into the public domain. So absolutely, I think that in some ways there'll be a resurgence, inshallah, of greater understanding our challenges and finding solutions, because we'll understand the sheikhs that went before us and what they had to endure in order to ensure that we have a foothold of Iman and a foothold of Islam in our country, inshallah. I mean, so shukran jazeeran for your contribution to this journey as well.
Absolute pleasure, Shafinaaz, and enjoy the rest of Ramadan.
Absolutely, with you as well. Please remember us and our audiences in your du'as. And we wish you strength to your pen as you continue, hopefully, to research and bring us these important social documents and historical detail.
Inshallah. And it was a pleasure chatting to you, and Salam Media.
And so there we have it. We got to hear from Mr. Shafiq Morton about his latest book, the story of Shaykh Abu Bakr Effendi. I hope that you'll be picking up copies for Eid, because this is a book that will really give you the understanding and the significance of the struggles of the Imams that went before us, who brought Islam to South Africa, who entrenched Islam in our hearts, and who ensured that we would have something solid as a foothold for our future, for our children's future. That's it from this weekend on Book Bites. We wish you everything of the best for the rest of Ramadan, and a beautiful Eid Mubarak to all of you. We go to our ad break, and with that, we close the final session of Book Bites, the Ramadan show, with thanks to the entire team that's been working so hard to keep this together, as well as to Ikra agencies in Lodium who sent a copy of this book. Everything of the best, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.